Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this fourth session of our Postbac Career Exploration series. So today we're going to hear about careers in data science. If you're following along with the whole series, this is the last one for the fall, so you have to wait all the way until January for our next installment. But today we have a really wonderful panel to hear about some of the different aspects of data science careers. I'm Laura Marler. I work in the Office of Intramural Training and Education at the NIH. I'm the Student Services Coordinator for our Graduate Partnerships Program, but you are not here to hear about me. And so I want to move on to our panel and hear about what they're doing in the field. I do want to address one logistical issue first, which is that we are going to be using your questions as we go along. And I would like you to put your questions in the Q&A. When you have them. So you can go ahead and start thinking of those while you hear the panelists' introductions and go ahead and put them in, but please put them in the Q&A rather than the chat, and that's where I'll be looking. And with that, I want to thank our panelists for being here, and I'm going to call on each of you to just tell us a little bit about your current role and what you're doing these days. And let's start with Yevgeniy.
Hi, my name is Yevgeniy. I'm currently a bioinformatics scientist over at Revolution Medicines in San Francisco Bay Area. So Revolution Medicines is a pharmaceutical company, early stage pharmaceutical company, and I'm in the research side of things. I started, sort of to back up, I guess, I started my education as a biologist, so I have a degree in biology, then I switched to computer science when I wanted to work on genomics. So I got a bachelor's of arts in computer science from GW, and I came to NIH later as a postbac after the computer science degree, and then applied to a graduate program, a graduate partnership program with Boston University, and got my PhD in bioinformatics, and then made it to the West Coast by way of St. Louis. So I've been here for about 6.5 years, working in the industry. Happy to take any questions related to kind of pharma side of things, and also living in the Bay Area. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Judy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Laura, for the introduction, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Viridiana Murillo, but I do go by Vidi. I am a variant scientist at Rady Children's Institute for Genomic Medicine, where we focus on providing accessible and rapid genome testing for undiagnosed patients, primarily in the neonatal and pediatric intensive care units with suspected rare genetic diseases. And so my background is primarily in molecular biology as well. I am more in the clinical genetics, genomics side of things. I do have a license as a clinical genetic molecular biologist scientist. I do have a bachelor's in human biology, but in the terms of data science, I started in data science, I want to say in my graduate studies, definitely. I obtained my master's in human genetics and genomic data analytics from Keck Graduate Institute. But I would say that I fully immersed myself in the world of data science in 2019 as part of the Graduate Data Science Summer Program at the NIH. And I think that's really kind of where things in terms of data science really started to play a major role. And now in my role as a variant scientist, I think this has been important because it gave me the technical skills, the knowledge, and the exposure to many of the concepts that now I can apply. But more than anything, it gave me the confidence and the ability to communicate, to think, to problem solve, and to incorporate into the different aspects of what I do, whether it's using AI-based tools or doing ClinVar submissions, my day-to-day role, or even communication with other teams. And collaboration. So I think that's a little bit of who I am and what I do. And I'm happy to take any questions that relate to any of it.
Great, thank you so much. Let's go on to Miriam.
Hi all, I'm Miriam Zaher. Apologies for my getup. They're doing construction in my house, and so it was either I'd be bundled up with a mask on or outside and bundled up with my face exposed. So I went for this option. With that disclaimer, I am at the National Institutes of Health at the National Library of Medicine, where I am the Data Science and Open Science Officer. And so with regards to data science, it's in my title, but I work more so on policies and programs related to advancing data science rather than identifying as a data scientist myself. And so what that means is thinking about ways in which we can incentivize researchers to be more collaborative with their data rather than, competitive and sort of holding it back. Ways that we can think about, increasing the transparency of code and data analytic tools that are kind of like under the hood. And ways that we can sort of translate that into communications that are more digestible by a variety of audiences, whether we're thinking about clinicians or biomedical researchers, data scientists themselves, or members of the broader non-technical public. And so I came to this role. My background is in molecular biology and bioinformatics. I got my PhD at the Rockefeller University in New York City. And then sort of midway through grad school, I realized that academia wasn't really the right fit for me. It was more of a generalist than a specialist, which I think is, sort of preferred if you want to go down that sort of professorial track. And so I looked for other options and found my way to the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, and AAAS stands for the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. And so it places PhD scientists and engineers with master's degrees into government positions for 1 to 2 years. And so I was placed at the NIH, at the National Library of Medicine. I didn't really understand at the time what a library did and what they wanted with a biologist like me. And it turns out that libraries are just amazing resources at making sort of the products of scientific research in the case of the NLM, but in general, just information accessible and digestible to a whole wide range of audiences. And so I'm happy to, be with you and get to learn from my fantastic co-panelists and get to hear your questions. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Brian.
Great. Yeah, thanks. I'm kind of an outlier here on the panel because I am not a scientist. I'm a social scientist, though. So my background is in education and economics and policy. So let's see, I don't know how far I want to go back. So I started out in the Department of Defense, and then I worked as a consultant there for a while. And then I came back to academia to help run an institute around 2012, something like that. So that's when I first started getting interested in. I was always doing data work. I was doing a kind of econometric modeling or kind of a lot of data visualizations. Actually, is where I started out, kind of in that space. We're using Tableau when it was like kind of a beta version of it. But when I went back into academia, we started building academic programs. So I helped build a business analytics program at the University of Tennessee, and then I went up to GW and I founded their data science program and their data science institute and a PhD program in the education school. And now I'm here at the University of Virginia. I'm the director of undergraduate programs here. And we built a minor, we're building a major, and then we just finished kind of building out a PhD. So I've kind of cut my chops in working in data related fields for a while, and then went back and started building data science programs. So that's what I've been doing. And I'm an assistant professor and director for undergraduate programs here at the first data science school in the country. No big deal, at UVA. So that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for sharing that. It's so interesting to hear the different kinds of roles that you have and kind of how broad the spectrum of roles can be in data science. Attendees, I'll just remind you, you can put your questions in the Q&A. And while we wait for some of those, I'm going to ask you all about kind of that breadth of roles that you can hold. So what do you see as some of the options for trainees who are transitioning from more of a bench science background to data science?
Ooh, the silence is deafening. I mean, I can speak to. I was going to wait because I didn't come from science, but I can tell you. I think that you know, and I'll let some of the other panels talk about it. It's like you're kind of in the golden age of data science right now. Is that where if you wanted to go into like a very applied area that aligns with your background, you know, in genomics or biomedicine generally, or pharmacology, there's lots of data science roles in those fields, you know, and actually we're really designing programs. We're really encouraging students at the end of the program, they're going to have to go to a concentration that just won't be in the school of data science. So they can learn something applied, but the options for the students in terms of what the concentrations might be are pretty broad. You know, it seems like, you know, you're in this 21st century world that's very data enabled. So there's not many fields, even at the very liberalist edge, that don't consume and use data in ways where, you know, having data science skills are going to be pretty in demand. I'm sure others will have more kind of purposeful discussion, like options about how they transition. But I do think that the nice part about having that, you know, kind of the backgrounds that they have, especially who's already in STEM fields, is that there's probably a whole variety of options that they could potentially explore. The harder part, I think, of finding, and I'll stop after this, is really, you know, maybe figuring out which one's right for you. Like it can be quite a difficult kind of intellectual journey to figure out exactly where you want to be and what mix of responsibilities you want to have. So I think that's kind of a high level answer to that, but yeah.
Going a little bit off of what Brian's saying, and on the topic of, you know, knowing what you're really interested in and your passion, because like he says, there's a broad range of opportunities in data science, and I can speak to it just based off of, say, right now, my current role and my institute. So for example, I am a variant scientist. I'm the only variant scientist right now, and this job didn't exist until I started. But that's one of the things that I do, and I can talk a little bit more as to what I do in terms of how we incorporate data science into my role. But there's also other positions. For example, right now we are currently hiring 2 data scientists to join our team at the Institute. These are both master level positions, but it is a new like position we're bringing on. We do have bioinformaticians, we have people who work on information management, we have people who work on the IT side of things, we have people who work on the development. Because we are in genomics, we have everything from developing, whether it's an interface, whether it's software, whether it's a way to process the data, whether it's workflows. So even in my institute alone, there's a really, really big range of career opportunities where different skill sets, technical abilities, and the background, more than anything, is you just have to figure out what you're passionate about. And I feel like there's always a way to incorporate it.
I think there's a big range of possibilities. I think some people do specialize, and some people like to be just general data scientists. For us, in kind of more of bioinformatics, there's more people who kind of have domain knowledge in biology, like I do, but not everyone. So I work with people who have very little background in biology. Someone actually came in with a background in biology, was a bioinformatician, and then switched careers and is doing something completely different in data science. He was trying to figure out what kind of ads to serve people who are watching a stream of like a video stream. So he's building like a recommender system there, and he's very happy with that. So I think the point is that data science is kind of gives you a very broad set of skills that you can apply kind of everywhere. There is some component of domain knowledge or domain expertise, but it's up to you what you would like to specialize in.
I think everyone pretty well covered it. Something that we've done some work just kind of thinking about what are the core competencies that are needed to be a biomedical data scientist specifically. And one of them is really just strong communication skills, because it is so interdisciplinary, and there is this ability to go and for a variety of settings. And so having those skills to, do team science and collaborate well across disciplines, I think really enables a great deal of versatility. And coming from the bench, if you are coming from the bench, I think that there is that like a strong kind of domain expertise that is really valuable in trying to, make that transition into more of the data science side of things.
Yes, thank you all. Eva has a question about degrees. Specifically, she's asking about a master's in stats versus data science and how to choose between those. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the different degrees in general, and how someone who's starting out in the field might choose, both in terms of the field or the department, and also kind of a master's versus a PhD.
I can take the first stab at the master's versus a PhD if someone wants to take the other part of the question. And the reason why I am interested in taking this on is because, Laura, you might remember this during my time at that NIH, I actually was doing a lot of informational interviews, and part of my questions to asking Bill, asking everyone I came across in the informational interviews was, if I want to be a variant scientist. I know I want to go into genomics. This is my interest. This is what I like. But is a master's right for me, or is a PhD the best option? Now, at the time, there weren't a lot of positions that were accepting master's students, because it is a growing field. And so a lot of them were primarily PhD. So I thought I would need a PhD to be in a position like the one I'm in now. And so that was something I was asking people. And I think it really varies depending on your interest and where you see yourself going. But I feel like ask around, definitely ask the people that are in the position where you see yourself, and then, ask the program directors. I think the most important thing or take home here is ask, because it really varies. And I learned that for me, the right choice was to explore the options, explore the opportunities. And it turns out that there was a position that it's literally my dream job, and it took a master's. Now, would I consider still going back for a PhD? Yes, but it depends. Now it's more in terms of career growth opportunities versus if it's a necessity for integrating myself in the role as a variant scientist, and what that looks like for me. So I really think it's something that is a personal decision based off of your interests, based off of where you see yourself going, and based off of the opportunities that exist.
I think my internet's coming and going, so I may go while it's here. So I'd echo a lot of the statements that were just said there. I think when you're thinking about stats versus data science, it's hard because there are so many variants of what people consider to be applied statistics, or more data science degrees that are actually more statistics or more based in computer science. And so it really, I think it's a good point. It just depends on what career you're trying to align with. Now, I'd be wary about getting a pure stats master's that has roots in theoretical kind of research based and going and being a data scientist, because the computational parts of it are often more important than actually the higher level analytics pieces of it. So if you can't operate, in the computational space efficiently, it really doesn't matter how good you are at theoretical math. You're just not going to function very well in a pure data science position. Now, if you're in a research position, that's a totally different story, right? So there could be a different expectation there. So the thing I think we struggle with the most when we think about the composite of students that come is like the statistics students that come into the master's programs, getting them up to speed on how to code efficiently and how to access cloud resources or parallel or all those computational, kind of theoretical things about how you do things at scale is something that's not really a foundational method or foundational piece of knowledge in stats. And it's the opposite for our CS students, so it might be really a question of where you come from, which makes the most sense to you. And then the last thing I'll say is there are things to be cautious with. That there's a lot of data science programs, data analytics programs that are starting up, and they have a tendency to try and capitalize on the name. So I would really dig into those programs. Think, are they creating their own courses, or are they just bootstrapping them from existing courses? And if they're doing that, is that actually a data science program? What type of application and capstone projects do they have? Things like that are important. And do they have their own faculty? I think can make a significant difference. So I think those are important questions to ask. Otherwise, the data science programs can be a bit unstable in terms of what they're offering.
Yeah, I would just add that if you can kind of picture yourself doing something. So let's say there's a job, or so maybe you found some jobs that you're interested in on one hand, and those jobs list the skills that are required. And then on the other hand, you can think about like a academic program and what sorts of skills you will learn as a result of completing that academic program. And and data science is a blend of a lot of things. So it's there's statistics, there's computer programming, and all this cloud engineering, and there's data visualization, and there's a lot of communication skills that are required. So stats is one component of it. It's very similar for bioinformatics, except there's also biology added as well. So it's about, I wouldn't worry about the name so much, but more maybe about the skills. But maybe a pure stats program is not necessarily the best fit, or it could be. It just depends what I think you'd like to do with that later.
Yeah, and picking up on a little bit of what Viri said, I think that informational interviews can be really helpful. So if you go to people who are in a career that that you want to occupy and ask them what kind of program they did, I think that could be a good indicator, because like everyone, I think the theme is that not all programs are created equal. And so, regardless of what name is sort of attached to it, whether it's data science or statistics, hearing the specific program that people in the job that you went to, I think is a good way to start. Informational interviews.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of informational interviews. One more thing to add, and kind of along the lines, and I think this was really important for me when I started my program. So my master's program was the first of its kind. I was part of the inaugural cohort. So it was very early on. But one thing that, because I knew where I saw myself, where I was going, and like going along what others were saying, knowing that skill set that it would require for me to get there, I took that, and I also looked at the program description. I looked at the classes that they were offering. I looked at what the intended outcome was for students who were going to join this program. And so I looked at that. I looked at, what skill sets do I need? What does this program say it offers me? And I went one step ahead, and I contacted the program director, and I set up a kind of an informational interview with them, but about the program. So asking them, okay, this is what I'm seeing. This is where I want to go. Can you help me get there? What resources are available? What would that, if I join your program, what would that look like for me in terms of not only coursework, but opportunities in terms of networking? What does your program have to offer me? Because this is what I'm looking for. This is what my background is. This is what I have to offer your program. But also, I need to make sure that it's a good fit for both of us. So I would honestly highly recommend that if you have the time, look at who the program directors are for these programs you're considering, and look at some jobs that might be out there, and just take that time to ask these questions.
Yeah, thank you, Viri. That's such good advice. I want to talk a little bit more about what you said about gaining skill sets and looking for those specific skill sets. One of our attendees asks, what are some important topics that you've learned on the job that you didn't learn in class? And I want to broaden that just a little to, what are the skills that you use in your current job, and how did you gain those? How did you seek out those skill sets?
I can start with this one. So my job description, like I have a main job that I do, which is as a variant scientist, I we work with pediatric patients. So my role is in the team is I get variants or changes in the DNA that, the primary analyst or the person that looks at it before me, they find this change and they think it might be related to the patient's clinical presentation. They think it might be, there might be an association with disease. And so my role is to find evidence to classify this as what we call pathogenic, or there's different tiers of pathogenicity. So does it cause disease? So in that role specifically, how I incorporate aspects of, or how aspects of data science are incorporated is we use a lot of AI-based genomic analysis. So the platform we use for genomic analysis is AI-based. Some of the software tools and resources that I use for interpretation are AI-based as well. So not only are they AI-based, but when we communicate with these teams that are basically hosting these software and platforms for us, there's specific things that we need for our institute. And so with my knowledge, even though I'm not doing data science as like a primary day-to-day, like if I'm coding or everything that I'm doing, I can communicate and I can help say, okay, this is what we need. I can understand the interfaces. In another role that I do, I submit variants to ClinVar. So I lead that for our institute. And for that, I do have to pull really large data sets. So I now have to transition to a role where I have to use an SQL-based interface. And I'm so thankful for my time at the NIH GDSSP and the project I had, because I can at least look at this and understand and not be overwhelmed. I can see what I'm looking for. I can plug and play a little bit with it. I clean large data sets. And so I think for me, in my role specifically, there's just different things I incorporate that have to deal with data science. It's a little bit of coding sometimes, like if I'm generating on a project, a workflow, or if I'm submitting a request from someone that I'm collaborating with. So really in my role, there's a lot of different things that take like play. But I would say that for the skill sets that you need and that they play in, really your best friend sometimes is Google. Google these jobs or these things, these interests that you have, who knows, it might exist out there, and just start putting together these lists. And if you don't know something, there's ways to learn it. Like I remember I really wanted to do variant analysis, and I asked when I was at the NIH, like, I really want to learn this. I'm not that good at coding. This is what I know. What resources? What can I do? Where can I learn more? So I think that's a little bit of what I have to share on that topic.
I think in addition to like technical skills that are always required, there's also, at least from the industry perspective, when I joined, I didn't know anything about drug development. I thought I did, just by reading Twitter, which is completely wrong. So I had to be educated completely on that, the complex regulatory landscape of it, how the data are communicated, and the different standards, completely different from the academia that are required here. Also, how to work in very a very flat organization, what we call a matrix environment, where you work on teams and projects. The formal relationship that you have with your supervisor is very different than the one you had in academia. How to manage a small team of people, all of those soft skills and communication. That's pretty much everything that I learned on the job, and I'm still learning. In addition to the extra things that you pick up along the way, like how to which statistical analysis to use for this type of data, and how to correct for basically multiple testing or things like that. So there's a lot of technical things that you will learn along the way, and there's also maybe 10 times more things that are not technical, more soft skills that you really have to master as well.
Something that I'll also add to that is, I think, really being thoughtful about, thinking about the limits of a particular data set, knowing, how a data set was generated, what sorts of, assumptions are baked into how they collected the data. And given those assumptions, what are the limitations of the analyses that you can actually apply? And so I think that, often if you just sort of like take a data set and plug it into, the algorithm that everybody likes to use without really thinking about what are the limitations of the data, what are the limitations of the like the analytical pipelines that you're using. There is a lot of potential, especially when we're thinking about the interface of data science and biomedical research or human health to replicate harms or create new harms. And so I think those kinds of critical thinking skills about how we came to a particular data set, and then also thinking about things like ethics. That's something that NIH and my sort of policy role that we're really thinking hard about. Another thing to kind of add to that. It's an exciting time to kind of be at the intersection of biomedical research and data science, because we're starting to think of, we're not starting, but we're really delving deep into these kinds of questions.
Miriam mentioned a very important topic, and kind of going back to one of the earlier questions we had about the roles that data scientists play in the different fields and stuff. And in genomics, that's another big one. We have a data compliance officer. For example, every time I'm going to submit variants to ClinVar, the data that I'm going to submit has to be submitted for review, because it is we are dealing with patient data. And so we need to make sure that no PHI or personal health information is included. We need to make sure that the data is compliant with both our institute and where we are submitting to. So that's another potential career opportunity / role that exists.
Yeah, thank you all. Did anybody want to add more on that one? I don't want to cut you off.
No, we're good. Go. Yeah, let's keep rolling. Let's go. I think it was covered. I have nothing to add.
Perfect. Thank you. So the attendees are asking, what is awesome about your career? What do you like most about what you do?
Oh man, I like being on data science panels the most. I'm doing it right now. I do to a certain extent, like my role is very much like a data science evangelist, that I've been through and built these programs and try and talk about the field. So I do think that's a part of it that I was all joking aside, I really do enjoy. But I think the thing that drew me to the field is just like it's like working through problems, like quantitatively working on teams and just solving problems. So I just think that that's really exciting. Whether I was building data science products in production in the private sector, or kind of working through problems with students in research space, it's just like this. It's a really fun space to be in. And it's data science is very much focused on problem solving or developing solutions, and I always just really like the pragmatic nature of that, because you get to see the impacts of it. It's a thing that actually exists, and when you put it in the real world, it may behave differently than you thought. So that's a whole nother problem to solve. So yeah, I just always really enjoyed the idea of working through tough problems, trying to figure out solutions, and then I always liked computational components of doing that. So it was kind of a natural fit for the things that I found to be kind of fun. So that's what led me there. Yeah.
I think for me, something that I've really enjoyed about my role at NIH is that I get to talk to a lot of people from a whole bunch of different communities and specialties and things like that. So I get to talk to people who are really steeped in the policy, thinking about, how we even sort of beyond data science and into the field of open science, which is, ways that we can make research more accessible to all different kinds of audiences. thinking about how we can advocate for these positions within, among our partner agency, or among our fellow agencies across the US government, getting to talk to biomedical researchers, data scientists who are trying to find ways to collaborate meaningfully with these researchers, clinicians who are thinking about how, data science applications will be put into, clinical care settings, thinking about how we train a new generation of biomedical data scientists. So talking to trainees like you all. And so I get to, before when I was in academia, I kind of only talked to people who were in my very, very narrow discipline, which was, a community of about like 20 or 30 researchers. And now I get to talk to really, anybody who's interested in tapping into the power and promise of data. So that's pretty cool.
I think for me, I will take this in a multi-step approach. So I think the first and foremost, and I will mention this as my first one because something I feel like I've worked towards and something that I absolutely love is that I always saw myself working in pediatrics. And really, I think the biggest part that I love about what I do is that everything that I work for, everything that I learned, every skill set that I have acquired, basically everything I get to incorporate in my current role to help serve and to help a lot of the times, and in some cases, even save lives of these critically ill babies. And so I think for me, that's the biggest thing. But in addition to that, there's other things I really, really enjoy, which is like collaborating with others, having that ability to, this is my knowledge, this is my domain, this is what I feel very, very strongly about. And really collaborating either on projects or having a knowledge exchange and really putting basically our brains together and, making things happen, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a project, whether it's brainstorming, bouncing off ideas. I think that's always great. Mentoring is another one. I think mentors played a big role in getting me to where I am today. So paying it forward for others who are either interested in something similar to what I'm doing or in other fields, it doesn't matter the background. I feel like we all have something in common a lot of the time. So I think that's another big one for me. So mentoring. And then the last one, something I really enjoy is along the lines of like mentoring and knowing people and connecting with others in different parts of the field or different aspects, whether it's genomics, data science, molecular biology, you name it. It's really knowing people, even if they're not in a closely related field, and coming across opportunities and being like, hey, I know a person, this opportunity, I thought of you when I saw this. And I think that's something that I really enjoy, like seeing opportunities that maybe they don't apply to me, but hey, I do know someone. So I think that's something I really enjoy, coming across opportunities and being able to share them with others.
I don't know. For me, I always like looking at complex systems. I don't know why, but making some kind of trying to understand how very complicated things work, like untangling those things, looking at patterns, something that I always like doing. And I like biology. So I'm very fortunate that I think the field came to be just as when I was in school. And then just applying those skills to human health and advancing, and improving human health is just tremendous. It's kind of without really joking about it, I think it's just a perfect occupation for me. And, I do have other passions in my life that are completely not work. Work stops at 5 and I go home and there's kind of and I don't do work after most days. So it's great that I can spend, 8 hours a day, really tackling some really complicated things and with people that I enjoy working with. I think it's a really nice, very beautiful career.
Well, I think that you have convinced our attendees. They would like to know if there are internships, workshops, or other chances to kind of try out data science and those opportunities to get started.
There are a lot of, at least in the Bay Area. So here, there's there's Genentech's, Gilead's, our company, a lot of biotech BMSs here. Lots of summer internships, typically targeting people who are in school. I think it's a great opportunity. It's obviously it's a paid internship. It actually pays pretty well. Pays like a contractor would be paid, I think. Yeah, I think that's probably the perfect way to get into it without too much commitment. To try things out. You get a real project and you're treated like an employee, and then you present something at the end. So it's a kind of a well-structured internship with a kind of a start and end date, and then there's employment opportunities afterwards if you would like.
There's also like a whole bevy of data for social good projects that are always looking for people to come help them. Though Miriam may know more about these things given her space, but if you there's Code for America, which is always looking for people to try and help and contribute. There are many summer data for social good programs at Carnegie and University of Richmond, University of Chicago, to name a few. Anyway, there's Stanford has one as well. And so those are where you would apply and then go work on data science projects for a short period of time in like an academic environment. And then there's a nice website, DataKind, that has kind of looks for volunteer data scientists for people to come in and help work on kind of social good oriented projects as well. So there's a few platforms there that are always looking for people. Yeah, there you go. They're always looking for people to help. If you just want to do it kind of on a part-time volunteer basis, it's a nice way, kind of to dip your toe in those waters.
I was trying to think of what to say, like scrambling my brain for what should I go with for this one. There's a lot of internships, like they mentioned, there's academic internships, there is biotech industry internships, and like they mentioned, those pay very well. Those give you a lot of opportunities in industry. And there's also nonprofit. So because I do work for a hospital that is a nonprofit, we do have some interns. And I know that there's other hospitals. When we were looking for internships, because part of my master's program required a summer internship, there was internships that were with hospitals. Specifically, I looked at children's hospitals due to my interest, but don't forget also there's NIH internships. I know the Office of Data Science Strategy has some summer programs, summer internships, and remember also not all internships are only in the summer. So it's also important to look during off season. So, during the academic year, there are some that will continue. And I think we're in a unique situation being with everything that's going on due to the pandemic, that a lot of these are remote and available and open. So keep that in mind too.
I might also mention, if you're in the DC area too, the DC data community in Washington DC is the biggest one on earth. I think it has like 25,000 members, so it has a pretty healthy like meetup. It's a meetup based organization. So you can go and watch people present, and that's a nice way to network and meet people that are in the space and pick up little projects to get a flavor for the feel of it. So DC data community is a really good resource. It's all online now, but it used to be obviously in person. I think they'll get back to that, but in and around the DC area, that's a when I was there at GW, I would really encourage the students to attend those, because that's a nice way to get kind of inside the culture of the field.
Yeah, and to that point, they I think that they host hackathons, or we call them at NIH codathons. So that's another really great way. NIH also hosts and runs codathons. So if you look, I think through the Office of Data Science Strategy, you should be able to see some of them. I can't think of any off the top of my head that are coming up, but that's a great way to kind of do some networking and have, a specific problem that you're trying to solve.
Another thing that kind of goes off of the topic of networking and internships, conferences. So a lot of the time you will meet people at conferences, or people will talk about, opportunities, or you'll see the name of a company or a place you're interested. You Google it, see if they have an internship, or you can ask them directly. A lot of a lot of the times that I've learned is people are more than willing to talk about themselves, their opportunities, their network, share their network, or, share resources with you. So, definitely check out some of the conference that you have specific interests in, see if you can connect with people there, see if the places that they work at have internships. And again, going back to the informational interviews, maybe start off with an informational interview, and during that, see if there's any opportunities for internships there as well.
Great, thank you, all of you. Yevgeniy, this question is probably for you, although others are welcome to jump in if you have something to add. How was the transition from academia to industry, and how did you start that transition?
Well, I wasn't really too much in academia. So I think after my PhD, I was a staff scientist at WashU in St. Louis. So that was kind of quasi-academic. I actually found it better in academia. In industry, obviously. It's more straightforward. Kind of, this is a job that you do. So, we actually don't put, when we're looking for candidates, we don't say we're looking for a passionate scientist or something like that. We're just, we're looking for someone who is interested. So it's so that passion piece that kind of academia requires, and you have to work long hours and, kind of just sacrifice everything for the sake of that. It's not here, it's optional. And I found that very refreshing, that I could have these very open conversations about, work-life balance, about compensation, about kind of things that I need. So attending conferences, or getting more resources, or going to school to learn some, I don't know, kind of people management skills or something like that. It's just so much more open. And it's very transparent about how, more or less, at least more transparent about how, what it takes to move up in the field. So how to get a promotion, and what is that cycle like? What is my end of the year kind of rating? It's just more kind of, it's just about, the work is much more transparent, but at the same time, it's just as interesting as academia. Maybe about the same amount of kind of freedom. You still work on very interesting problems. So that piece is still there. So so I actually found the transition to be very refreshing.
I can take this question in a little bit of a different way, in terms of transitioning based off of how do you get from either academia into a job in industry, or how do you get from, if you're going, like I went from working in an academic lab in undergrad, finishing working there for a little bit longer, into industry. Then I went from industry to another biotech. Then I went back for my master's, and now I'm in a nonprofit space. I think for this, and how I went from working in a research lab at an undergraduate lab to my first job in academia, was LinkedIn. So one of my friends, and we used to work in neighboring labs, she was working in a company, and we were on LinkedIn, and she happened to, we connected, and she mentioned, hey, we're hiring and we're looking for someone that has your skill set. Is that something that you might be interested? Here's the job posting, let me know. And I think the nice thing about LinkedIn is we can see each other's, where we've worked, if we put some of the skill sets, and it's also really easy to connect with others. Like, if I see someone in someone else's network, and I'm like, hey, I see you know this person, is there any way you can facilitate a connection? Or even just reaching out directly, sending a message, and asking, or introducing myself. So I think LinkedIn is a big way to, at least start considering those transitions, or who knows, it might help you as well. So definitely utilize that. And speaking of LinkedIn, if any of you are interested or have any questions or want to connect, or there's someone in my network that I might be able to connect you with, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me by my full name, Viridiana Murillo, and I am a variant scientist, or you can just Google the information and find me on LinkedIn. But definitely, I feel like that's a big one that I utilize.
Thank you. I wonder if you can address maybe just briefly how common it is to find positions that combine data science and bench work, and what those positions might look like.
I can start. So when the company was small, people were wearing many hats, and there was a kind of a bench scientist hired who had interest in doing computational work, and he slowly kind of started doing more and more computational work, and now he's doing 100% computational work. I mean, typically it's hard to balance unless the company is very small, and there is that kind of, you're doing a lot of things. I think it's more typical in a smaller organization than it is in a more established one. I try to do that too. Back when I was pipetting, and then doing mouse work, and then doing some analyses in the afternoon. Just very difficult. And then I prefer doing analyses, and I just kind of switched to just doing bioinformatics and not going up to see the mice that day. So I slowly made that. So typically people choose one or the other. It's hard to find somebody who's doing both for a long time, kind of on a long-term basis.
I don't have anything to add to that, but I feel like that was very well said.
Great,
No.
thank you. Thank you, Yevgeniy. One of our attendees asked about kind of the culture in maybe in academia versus industry, or maybe in both, but what is it like to be a woman in data science, since it can often be a male-dominated field? And Miriam and Viri, I wonder if you would mind just to speak to that a little bit.
I think this one might be a better one for you, Miriam. But for me, I think even now, it's not that I don't confidently identify. I like, even being here, I am very honored that I get to be here and speak with all of you. But I think for me, it's because I feel like I identify and always have with being a scientist, a wet lab scientist. So, and then now being more of a variant scientist, being more in genomics. So I feel like when people are like, oh, well, you're also a data scientist, and I'm like, well, that's not my primary role, but I guess you're right. So I think it's having that for me. And I remember I went to a conference, it was a LTX Next, I think it was Latinos in Tech, and I am Latina, and I felt like, but I'm a scientist. I'm not sure if I kind of fit in with this being a data scientist or being in tech, but it's the aspect of the roles that we do and what we fulfill in our knowledge. It makes us part of these communities. And I think it's, for me, something I'm constantly working on is understanding that I don't have to form part of just one community and be under like one label. I'm fortunate that I get to be part of multiple communities because of the knowledge, the background, the expertise, and more than anything, not letting that imposter syndrome sit with me and letting me know that I have something to contribute in all of these aspects, in all of these fields, and that I have something important that I have to contribute in these rooms, in these spaces. So I think that's something I clearly am still working on, but it's not only applicable to being a woman in data science. I think it's being a woman in a lot of the realms that we're part of.
I think that was really, really well put. I too don't really identify readily as a data scientist. I mean, I'm not a data scientist, and that's not imposter syndrome speaking, I don't think, or I'm really deep in it. But I am in a role where I'm thinking about sort of policies around data science and where NIH goes with data science. And so I do think something that I've really appreciated about my role, and I happen to be in an office with that is dominated by women. So there's way more of us who are working on these sorts of data science issues in my sort of the people that I interact with. And I have been really fortunate that, as I'm thinking about, workshops that sort of inform the future of how we think about data science careers or data science as a discipline, I've had this space to sort of put together the rosters of the people that are invited to these. And I remember the first time I did this, it was a workshop that was trying to think about how we could attract more data scientists to NIH research projects. And so I was tasked with putting together this list, and I chose, not only women in data science, but Black scholars and innovators and data scientists, people from all kinds of racial and ethnic backgrounds, people who come from different parts of the country, because there's different challenges related to data science infrastructure depending on where you are and the resources that your institution has. And when the people walked into the room, they were just like, this looks very much like a room that I'm not used to as a data scientist. And the discussions that we had were really focused on thinking about the intersections of data science and justice and equity, thinking about how we can have more, equitable access to these resources and be training a workforce that is thinking about issues and ethics, in addition to, or as they intersect with moving this field along. And so, I guess that's to say, regardless of your background, your voice and perspectives matter for making this field better, and for ensuring that, we go as far as possible, not to sound overly corny, but I do think that it's, incredibly important, the sorts of experiences, lived experiences, as well as technical experiences that are brought to bear. And I know that that's really difficult sometimes with imposter syndrome, with, the ways that certain communities have been marginalized. But I'll just leave it there.
More quick thing, just because it came to my mind, because I like to prepare for anything I'm going to do, whether I'm going to speak on something, whether I'm going to, meet with someone. I like to do my research and I like to be prepared. So in advance to this panel, I did look up a couple of topics relating to data science, knowing my audience, who what opportunities are out there for postbacs, for trainees, and all of that stuff. And one of the searches I did yesterday was NIH Women in Data Science. So there is a, if you go to datascience.nih.gov and /NIH Women in Data Science, there was a feature, I think it was by the Office of Data Science Strategy, that highlights several women in data science. And so if you're interested, that's definitely something to look at. But I feel like, it's not only applicable to women. I feel like there's a diversity in terms of, just like there's diversity in terms of knowledge, there's a diversity in terms of ethnic backgrounds, how we identify. I think, and one really good example was when I walked into our first meeting of the GDSSP program, we were about half women and half men. And we represented diversity in terms of not only our backgrounds, some of us were, molecular biology, some were very heavy programming, some were statistics, some were math. Like, I think there's a very good representation and diversity in the way a lot of these programs and things come together. So
I'll just mention going out the door. Obviously, I am not female, but I will say that in the data science programs that we have, they are all majority female, all of them. The master's programs, the PhD, well, the PhD might be kind of an even split. The undergraduate programs, I mean, UVA is majority female, but we don't seem to have too many problems. There's some diversity issues relative to, minority classes generally, but the diversity between the gender is actually in favor of female. So whereas the field may feel that way right now, the data scientists are coming out swinging. So we're trying to put them out there as much as possible. So anyway, just a heads up. So there you go.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you very much for sharing that. We're just past 2 and I want to respect everybody's time. If you have to hop off, I completely understand. If you have another minute, maybe you can just briefly share what your advice is for somebody starting in the field right now. If there's something that you think they should know that we haven't covered, and it can be short, but I would love that one last thing, and then we'll say goodbye.
I can just say that I think communications is really key in the data science space. I think it's often a skill that gets overlooked because it's not like one of those sort of hard skills. But I think that, having those effective communication skills, no matter, whether you're a data scientist or anything at all, is extraordinarily helpful.
I think just having curiosity and not taking yourself too seriously kind of just helps a lot. Or if you're applying for jobs and the job description reads like a salad of skills, so reads like a whole department instead of a one job position, just don't feel intimidated. I mean, it's something that we're trying not to do, but it just reflects kind of a broad range of skills that people are interested when they're hiring. So I think if you can tick off maybe 2 boxes out of the top ones, I think you're fine. So I think some people get discouraged when they see like a laundry list of skills, cloud engineer / someone who knows PyTorch and doing image recognition on pathology images. I think don't get discouraged. I think it's as an industry, we're aware of what's happening with these job descriptions that are kind of getting out of control. Just apply and it's okay. If your skills don't match, then they don't match, but don't take that personal. I think don't disqualify yourself from things that you see out there.
I think for me, there's a lot of things I could say, but I would say ask a lot of questions, be curious, find mentors and find your community. But more than anything, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to people, because you never know what opportunities will come up. You never know what doors might open. And for me, I'm the kind of person that I think that's why I'm a scientist, because I love to ask questions. But I think that I really, really do feel like that's opened a lot of doors for me, just asking questions. Because at the end of the day, the worst someone can say is no. And the best they can do is say yes or help you out. So I feel like for me, it's just that. Just, you never know what opportunities are out there. And also don't turn down an opportunity because you may not think you have the skills, or you might not think that you're good at it. Because if I had done that, I wouldn't have been part of the GDSP program, because I know I told Ryan, like, hey, you accepted me, but you know that this is my background. This is how much experience I have. So, and it was the best thing that could have happened, because now that opened up so many opportunities. Thank you, Brian. It was a pleasure being with you on this panel. But yes, with that, I will wrap up.
Oh, yeah, no, I was waving bye to Miriam actually, but it's okay. It's all right. It was good being on the panel with you as well. I don't know if you're done. You go ahead. Mine will be real quick.
I am done. Laura, okay. If you want to share, if there's the best way to share my LinkedIn for anyone that's interested, that's definitely the very best way to reach out to me. If anyone has any questions, if there's anything that I might be able to help with, or if anyone wants to get on the list of if I know of any opportunities and pass them along. So, or also I know that I mentioned most of the positions we have open related to data science are in for master's level, but if anybody's interested in any positions with our institute, definitely feel free to reach out to me.
That's great. Yeah, there's not too much to add there. I would just say I would focus on projects. I think that goes with asking questions. Like, find good projects. that can make all the difference. And then, you know, there's no canonical path into the field of data science. So don't think there is some like authoritative way. All of us on the panel here all took different roads. And so, you know, if you kind of focus on interesting projects you want to work on, and that might be a good way to think about it as compared to trying to find, you know, some type of really, you know, high-end skill-driven position. That's it.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for being here and giving your time and giving a few extra minutes and sharing all of these insights with the attendees. I really appreciate it, and I know that they do. So thank you. It's very good to see you. I hope you all have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us. And it's been a pleasure being here with all of you.
Thank you.
Same. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Thank you all.